Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qizhi. Coming up in this edition, the Turkish president says his country has severed ties with Israel. The Peruvian capital is hosting a series of meetings on climate, energy, and the indigenous people ahead of the APEC summit. And the Democratic Republic of the Congo has put off an m-pox vaccination campaign in its capital, Kinshasa. We begin on the Middle East. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Turkiye has severed ties with Israel and has no intention to take steps to improve relations. Turkey suspended trade with Israel in May in response to the attacks on Gaza. Jonathan Recep reports from Tel Aviv.
Ties have been practically severed for more than a year now, since October 7th. Turkey is probably the biggest critic of Israel since the war began. At least on the ground, relations still exist. There's still a Turkish embassy in Tel Aviv. There's still an Israeli embassy in Ankara and a mission in Istanbul. But relations, of course, which were very, very tense since the beginning of the Erdogan term in Turkey, have been deteriorating more and more since the war began. And now President Erdogan is saying that the ties are no longer there. It comes due to criticism on Erdogan in Turkey, saying that while he declares that the relations are gone, still on the level of commerce and economy, they still exist. We have to be honest and say that relations between Israel and Turkey since October 7, 2023 are practically gone, with or without President Erdogan speaking about that.
That was Jonathan Recep reporting in Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, Israel has again demanded the resignation of the head of the UN Aid Agency for Palestinians. Israel claims some UNRWA staff participated in Hamas attacks on October 7th last year. UNRWA has fired some of its staff members that it found may have been involved. Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini called on all countries to prevent Israel from implementing legislation that prohibits the agency's operations in the Palestinian territories. Jody Jacobs reports from the UN headquarters in New York.
Last month, Israel's parliament voted to ban the UN Relief and Works Agency UNRWA from the country within 90 days. This despite opposition from the US and other UN member states. With ongoing tensions between Israel and the UN aid agency, Israel's ambassador is now also calling for UNRWA head Philippe Lazzarini to step down.
Commissioner Lazzarini, there are no more cover-ups. You have lost all plausible deniability. Your thin disguise as an aid organization has fallen.
But Lazzarini denies the allegations and says he is willing to investigate them, but doing so while the fighting continues is near impossible.
We are discussing to put in place a board of inquiry to look into all these allegations. Right now in Gaza, as we know, war is still raging. It's 90% of the Gaza Strip is under military evacuation. This fact-finding or board of inquiry or investigation team will certainly be able to be fully operational once a ceasefire has been reached.
The UN maintains that there is no replacement for UNRWA in Gaza, as the organization is mandated to provide not only humanitarian assistance but also education and healthcare to millions in the enclave. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues to worsen as the region grapples with unprecedented challenges in the wake of the ongoing conflict. Aid organizations continue to warn that the situation is becoming increasingly dire. On Tuesday and Wednesday, the UN says life-saving aid to the north of Gaza was blocked by Israel. The United Nations says Israel has missed its deadline set by the United States to boost aid into Gaza. Last month, the US Secretary of State gave Israel an ultimatum of 30 days to ensure more aid trucks reach Gaza daily. That deadline expired on Tuesday, and the UN says things remain critical in the enclave. The UN says over the past month, the average number of trucks getting into the strip was around 37 per day. Israel disputes these figures and blames the UN for failing to deliver the aid.
That was Jody Jacobs reporting on Israel and UNRWA sparring at the United Nations. Turning to South America, a series of meetings in Lima will focus on climate, energy, and the indigenous people. These discussions are taking place ahead of the APEC summit, where leaders from member economies, including Chinese President Xi Jinping, will meet in the Peruvian capital. Under Peru's chairmanship, APEC hopes to reach consensus on more inclusive trade, innovation, and digitalization to facilitate sustainable development. Michelle Begu reports from Lima.
We have a lot of different sectors that are trying to show what's going on in the region. We had the APEC Business Advisor Council, and they talked a lot about climate change issues, the transition in energy, and how to have more sustainable ways of producing energy, and that they have a dialogue at the end with leaders to present their findings. So we've had a lot of sideline events. We ended with the Indigenous Peoples event, where Indigenous peoples are trying to be included in dialogues and have their agenda as well included. We were seeing an analysis of trends in the region, and they talked about several key issues. For example, climate change. They talked about the issues that we saw this year at the Panama Canal. Because of the fact that there was less rain this year, there were not as many cargo ships going across the Panama Canal. Now we're having the rainy season again, but we need to think about the future. What's going to happen when we have that dry season again? They talked about the aging population as well. That was another issue. They talked about also the energy transition that we need to have in the world, in fact, because in the next 5 years, the energy demands are going to double. And so where is that going to come from, especially in a world with higher geopolitical tensions? These are all things that need to be addressed. And so they said APEC is the place to do this.
That was Michelle Begu reporting in Lima. In North America, a brush fire has broken out in a park on the northern tip of Manhattan, sending smoke billowing across New York City. The fire department has responded to a record number of blazes in recent weeks, while other crews continue efforts to contain a wildfire on the New Jersey-New York border. Across the country, California has gained ground on a major wildfire near Los Angeles. It is Tianxian reports.
Train service out of New York to parts of northeast United States was interrupted on Wednesday after rail power was shut down when two separate fires came dangerously close to tracks. The area has been under severe drought conditions for weeks, leaving residents worried.
It's heartbreaking. Not only are we in danger that something we could all lose our homes from the fire, and then our family history from up here would be gone. Everything would be a memory.
The so-called Jennings Creek fire is just one of dozens of fires burning across the northeast United States. Many of them are extremely difficult for fire crews to reach.
They're very limited trails, very steep, rugged countries, and there's some fire roads from like 40 years ago that we've managed to get in and access to. But again, they haven't been maintained in 40 years because it is like a wilderness area. So it's very difficult to get in there.
Red flag conditions that include high temperatures, low humidity, and gusty winds have prevented crews from controlling the flames in several states.
Much of this area is remote, and it's hard to access by vehicles, but also there's not homes or property there. So that's important as well, to know that the larger population areas are not in danger from this.
On the West Coast, however, fires have been much larger and more devastating. It took more than a week for fire crews to take control of the mountain fire in California's Ventura County, which destroyed more than 200 structures, most of them homes. Officials also reported more than $6 million in agriculture losses from the fire and are now bracing for what appears to be a long, difficult road ahead for the community to rebuild and recover.
That was Edish Tianshan in Los Angeles. Turning to Africa, the Democratic Republic of the Congo has put off an m-pox vaccination campaign in its capital Kinshasa due to a shortage of vaccines. The campaign was planned for November the 6th, but authorities have postponed it until new vaccine doses arrive. The country has recorded over 40,000 cases and 1,000 deaths so far this year. Chris Okumringa has more from Kinshasa.
The m-pox outbreak continues to spread in the DRC despite the introduction of measures to curb it. The Health Ministry launched a vaccination campaign in October in the most affected provinces in the east and western parts of the country. It had plans to roll out the campaign in Kinshasa, but they are facing a shortage of more than 180,000 vaccines.
La vaccination ayant terminé pour la première phase, nous sommes en préparation.
We've completed the first phase of vaccination and are now preparing for the second phase in the 6 provinces and the 13 health zones in Kinshasa, but we lack enough doses.
In September, the DRC received 265,000 doses of vaccines from the European Union and the US. It used most of the vaccines in the provinces with the highest levels of cases. Japan promised to donate 3.5 million doses for children, but they haven't arrived yet. France and Germany have also pledged to send more vaccines. Officials say the delay in the arrival of vaccines has been partly caused by the administrative process. They're expecting 100,000 doses from the EU this week. Children in the DRC have been the most heavily affected by m-pox. Figures from Save the Children show that the number of children in the DRC who contracted the viral disease rose from 11,000 in August to over 25,000 in November. The World Health Organization declared the m-pox outbreak a global health emergency in August after cases of a deadly strain spread from the DRC to some of its neighboring countries.
That was Chris Okumringa reporting. Finally, in Asia, the second Global South think tank dialogue has opened in East China, focusing on equality, openness and cooperation. The event in the city of Nanjing brings together think tanks from around 100 countries, along with Chinese universities and research centers. Huang Yue reports.
The second Global South think tanks dialogue has kicked off here in Nanjing, the capital city of East China's Jiangsu province. Over 400 scholars and representatives from Global South think tanks have gathered here for this event. One of the highlights was the official launch of the Global South Think Tank Alliance. Actually, last month when Chinese President Xi Jinping attended the BRICS summit in Kazan, he announced that China will lead the establishment of such an alliance to promote people-to-people exchanges and mutual learning on governance among different countries. So an unveiling ceremony was held to mark the official establishment. So far, over 100 think tanks from emerging market and developing countries have participated in this alliance, along with 100 think tanks from the Chinese side, including top universities and research institutions such as the Renmin University, Tsinghua University, the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and the think tank of China Media Group. And I was told that the working mechanism of the alliance is based on the principle of voluntary access and has no binding articles. And also I've been told that since now these members of the think tanks have gathered here in Nanjing, they will have a chance to know each other about their research fields, their talent pools, and some of them might pair with each other. And in the future, they will conduct joint research and publish joint reports. And these reports will not just be limited to Global South cooperation, but also related to regional development and promoting the synergy of development strategies among different countries. Additionally, this alliance is also ambitious about building up more dialogue platforms and forums for scholars from these nations to exchange their views. And this morning, during the opening ceremony, Liu Jianchao, the Minister of the International Department of the CPC Central Committee, said that in the next 5 years, China will welcome over 2,000 scholars from Global South nations to attend the forums and dialogues and seminars to exchange their perspectives.
That was Huang Yue on the Global South think tank dialogue. Now recapping the headlines, the Turkish president says his country has severed ties with Israel. The Peruvian capital is hosting a series of meetings on climate, energy and the indigenous people ahead of the APEC summit. And the Democratic Republic of the Congo has put off an m-pox vaccination campaign in its capital, Kinshasa. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thanks for listening.